This conference will now be recorded.
Thank you. I would like to call to order the Tuesday, November 1st meeting of the Monmouth City Council and ask our city recorder for our roll call, please.
Counselor Belt?
Excused. She
Okay.
came in later.
Counselor Carey?
Here.
Counselor Lopez?
Here.
Counselor McKeel?
Here.
Counselor Oberst?
Here.
Counselor Salinas Oliveros?
Here.
Mayor Kuntz?
I am present. And tonight, if I can ask Councilor Lopez to lead us in Pledge of Allegiance.
Ready? Begin.
I
pledge
pledge
allegiance
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Our consent calendar, first item of business, consists of the minutes of the council meeting of October 18th. Those were in your packet. If there were any corrections or additions, now's a good time to mention that before we move forward. Don't see anything. A motion to approve would be requested.
So moved.
Thank you, Councilor Salinas Oliveros. A second.
Second.
Thank you, Councilor Oberst. All in favor of approving the consent calendar as submitted, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And
Aye.
none opposed. We do have time set aside in our agenda for public comments. We have some guests this evening, but they're here to report to us about their activities. Phyllis, did we have any submitted comments? I don't see anyone online.
We did not have any submitted comments, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. All right, then we will move right into our business agenda. And our first item is to invite these volunteers to tell us a little bit about the goings on at the Monmouth Historic Commission. And Suzanne, are you introducing or are they just taking it on? But if you can get to a mic.
I'm sorry, but I can't understand a word you're saying, so you're going to have to bear with me.
Okay, come on up. Suzanne has the PowerPoint.
Oh, I don't usually need it.
Sure. Thank you to the Historic Commission for being here tonight. We have Nita and Jim and Bob with us tonight, and thank you so much for being here. And I look forward to seeing the PowerPoint. So thank you.
Online, it looks like we have Beth with us as well.
Oh, is Beth here? Hi, Beth.
Hi, how's it going?
Good. Thanks for being here. Okay, we can go ahead and get started if one of you'd like to take the lead.
Yep, you're welcome to take your mask off when speaking, Nita,
Oh,
if that's
thank
more
you,
comfortable
thank
for
you,
you.
thank you.
Sure. And just
I am way too old to wear these things.
if we can get the mic close so we're sure to hear you, that'd be cool.
We are members of the Monmouth Historic Commission, and other members of the committee are Lori Albert, of course, Bob Edgar and Jim Mannon. And we also then have Beth Dykstra and Alice Rudersdorf. Is that how you pronounce it? And then Ron Woodruff. And then, of course, you're Rebecca. We are almost giddy. This year we've had more success than I can ever remember in one year, and so I'll probably be rambling just a little bit. But our first success this year started out with the wood, excuse me, we got the designation, historical designation of the Burford Stanley home on South Monmouth, which took several years to do. And then we had the opportunity to establish historic designations on the Ross Theater and the old former evangelical church. But I'll talk more about that later. The railroad mural is up, and we're very proud of it. We would have rather had it on Ross Building because it would have been had more exposure, but apparently that wasn't to be. But I hope everyone has seen it, especially when there weren't any cars parked in front of it. Sunday is a good day to check on that. Our observance of the anniversary of the Columbus Day storm was, I thought, very successful. We had this room practically half full, so it was very happy. We were very happy with that. And also, it was discovered that there was a fallout shelter on Western's campus, and they had an open house last month, and it was very interesting in touring that. And I was unaware of that. Of course, I spent those kind of years out in the hills of Airlie, so Monmouth wasn't in the history. And then members of a commission met with our architectural consultant for the former evangelical church, which is now Abundant Life Church. And we are very encouraged because the consultant's work ethic is very good, and he may have things pretty well wrapped up by the end of the year. We have discussed the walking tour brochure for several years, and I think this year we're going to update it. And we are we have a real architecture on our commission. And so we're going to put him to work, and because over these years we've been kind of struggling with the historical designations of the various buildings that we're interested in. And so we've encouraged him to develop a historic design guidance for us, and then for other counties and states or cities besides us. Do you guys have anything else to say? Well, as far as I'm concerned, and I think I can speak for the rest of us, it's been a good year. And thank you.
Well, you've been at this a long time, Nita and Jim, so it's good to see you both excited that we're making so much progress, and I do hope that continues. This looks like a great work plan. Certainly is exciting when we have folks just volunteer who have so much expertise to join the commission and get this work done. It's been some great partnerships this year. Do we have any questions or comments for the Historic Commission? I'm checking our online members to.
Just keep going. Good stuff. Good job.
Yeah, it's such a pleasure serving with you. I'm learning
It's-
so much, and it's such a great group that has energy and enthusiasm. And so I'm excited to see what this year brings. So thank you. Thank you for all your
It's
work.
been very interested in learning the history of these various buildings. It's it's amazing what you can learn just by studying the history of a building and the surrounding then events that happen during it. Of course, I'm a genealogist, so anything like that is.
All right. Well, thank you very much for volunteering your time, everyone, and for the extra work this year on those projects. And we look forward to next year's report. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're fine. All right. Our next item of business is a report from our finance director, Ms. Janet Chenard. And already we heard about the end of 2022 fiscal year. Now we're ready to get going on this one.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and honorable council members. Before I dive into the first quarter report, I did want to share the exciting news that if you haven't already got them, Phyllis is hopefully going to have put your hard, yes, yes, your
It's
hard copy
beautiful.
documents.
They're so
Thank you.
pretty.
They are very pretty.
Well, credit for the cover goes to our intern, Chloe Erdahl. I threw some pictures at her and I said, "Can you make this nice?" And so, yes, that was not my right brain activity. That was hers. But I also encourage you, I know that you, of course, looked at your proposed budget documents like love letters as far as, making sure that you knew them inside and out. But there's a lot of nice added material for additional transparency because this is the document that is more widely shared with the public and with the bond agencies and so forth. So, I know, for example, Councillor Lopez's favorite general fund percentages spreadsheet is in there now with some additional explanation. And I've also added some charts and graphs that I think tell a better story and expanded on the city overview. Not necessarily budget number type stuff, but stuff that tells our story as a city entity and also tries to align your vision and values with everything that we're doing. So I hope you'll take a chance to at least glance through the budget summary section again and maybe some of the appendices that are added in. As well as the debt and capital section. The capital section is another one that I tried to expand on. I know this is one of Councillor Carey's areas that he's very interested in. So please do spend some quality time with your hard copy budget. With that, I'll move on to the first quarter report. So the first quarter of the fiscal year that is being dealt with in your budget is actually looking fairly well as we expected and hoped. We are still, in fairly good shape with some grant monies to be spending on projects and so forth. But as well, things are actually looking pretty well with regard to our property taxes. You can't see that yet in the first quarter. But we've received word that it is going to be a little bit above the 3% again this year with all of the development that we've had. And also your urban renewal district is going to be well above the 3% again, not quite at the levels of last year, but still well north of 20% higher. So that's exciting. And I also wanted to bring to your attention, as I said in the staff report, that you won't see the WIMPEG funds in here. Although they will stay in your budget document for a couple of years until the activity falls off. But I did remove them from the quarterly report since there's no activity. And I did insert now the trolley or the transit fund, which is going to be the trolley program. And so by second quarter, we hope to see some spending for those trolleys that are going to get delivered over the next quarter. So I'm giving you a little preview of the second quarter. But as I said, the first quarter is generally on target as far as both revenues and expenditures. If you were to take a look at my little green, yellow, red thing, there is no red, which is always good. And there's still just the same 2 yellow areas that we do keep a watch on, but are not overly concerned with at this point, which are your fines and forfeitures. And the gas fund is the only reason it's on a watch level is because it's very hard these days to know what gas prices are going to do. I'm feeling pretty good about the fact that we basically doubled appropriations over last year, so we should, as long as we don't see another spike, we should be fine there. But again, just keeping an eye on that. Your utility funds are doing well. There is, of course, always the concern of inflation, which we're seeing a lot of, and that is just affecting us as far as capital projects goes, and as far as materials purchases go. Things are just have a super long lead time still, and are very expensive. And so I don't have a lot more to say on that because it is still the first quarter, early times. The only other thing that I would probably focus on a little bit is the investment report at the end, where you'll see that the local government investment pool rates are going up, just as your interest rates are going up for borrowing. And so I hope to wait a little bit on doing that urban renewal bond or loan just to see if things will settle down a little bit as far as borrowing rates for that. But in fact, just today, the LGIP went up again, and it's up now to 2.5%. So it is trending up fairly quickly. But Councillor Oberst was asking offline about plans to maybe try and invest out a little further to gain some of the interest rate momentum that we're seeing. And I am in the process of establishing a safekeeping account, which I think I told you about last when I did the last quarterly report. Unfortunately, it's just been very crazy trying to get budget done and audit done, and so it has not yet been established, but luckily the LGIP is moving up at such a rate it may become moot. So I do hope, though, to be able to at least take some of our reserve funds and that we don't need immediately to be liquid, and put them out a little further and maybe take advantage of these higher interest rates. With that, I would take any questions you might have.
Councillor McKeel.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in before Councillor Carey starts his, deep dive into the budget. So.
Fine-tooth comb.
So I was, and I'm sorry. This is always a great report, Ms. Chenard. But I was trying to find where the sidewalk fund was in the report, or maybe it's in some other report, and if that's being accessed. My question is it being accessed and used? Sorry.
Okay, no, that's fair enough. And I think that may be a better question for Director Cooper, who I thought was on. Yes, he is. I know that I do see spending in the street fund, but he may know whether people are taking advantage of the sidewalk fund.
So can you hear me? That's the first question. Make sure that it's working for me. Yes, so we did approve 2 sidewalk repair grants just in this current month. So I'm sure those wouldn't show up in the report that you see, but will show up in that second quarter report.
But Director Cooper has been doing a great job of getting spending done on getting sidewalks repaired, and put in on Madrona with some of our surface transportation dollars. We are getting, that's a really good segue, Councillor McKeel, into the fact that we did actually this week get already another $750,000 from our state surface transportation funds. And so that enables us to do a lot more work on sidewalks and streets, and as long as we have the manpower and bandwidth to make that happen.
Great, thank you so much. You know my bigger question, so thank you for anticipating. And I'm still loving those sidewalks on Madrona. Oh my gosh, I'm really loving that.
Other questions or observations? Yes, Councillor Lopez, and then Councillor Oberst, and then Councillor Carey.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you as well, Ms. Chenard, for the thorough report. I would like to just move back to the generalizations, the summaries there, and look at the MyNet fund. Historically, this has been listed as a yellow watch item, and I'm happy to see it as a positive, a green positive item in this report as well. I was wondering if you were able to share any information on the longer term outlook with MyNet repaying some of the bonds back to the city.
Sure. Yes. Thanks for mentioning that, Councillor Lopez. Well, two things I would say, and I did highlight this in under the MyNet fund, that they did make their full first payment, and that's the first time they've done that in ever in my time. And so they made their first full payment on the bonds that are currently due, and they very much anticipate their cash flows look like they will continue to do that for at least this year and next year. And I think they anticipate actually being able to carry those two for the rest of that time. So I'm anticipating that this budget season, we won't have to budget anywhere close to that. We will probably always keep a reserve just in case something happens from an operational standpoint that changes that. But that said, not having to set aside those funds for purposes of paying the current bonds is helpful. I am also aware, as I believe you and City Manager Weiner are aware, that we are looking at a possibility of consolidating the MyNet debt that is owed to us, the promissory notes that they've been making, that they've been writing over to us for the shortfalls that they've had in the current debt to date. Right now, that number looks like about I want to say 4.3 million is what it was as of the end of June 30th, 2022, that they owe us from those shortfalls. And consolidation of that would mean adding in the interest due to date at 3%. So capitalizing that interest into a principal payment that would then come due over a time frame which they've got a proposal, I guess, on the table. It hasn't been formalized yet or signed, but they are working on negotiating that. And I think there's a board meeting, if it hasn't already happened, coming up to discuss that. But both the Independence Finance Director and myself have vetted their payment schedule, and it looks really very, I'll say exciting almost, in the sense that it looks realistic and it looks like they will be able to pay it off, which is also the other thing I would add to that, since I'm now in the throes of audit, is that we have a fully established allowance for doubtful accounts for those dollars. And I am hopeful that if we consolidate this debt and they begin to pay on it, that we'll be able to forego that allowance and actually be able to call it a receivable that is worth money. So I would say the outlook is good. It is positive, and I'm feeling very optimistic at this point.
Oh, fantastic! That's always music to our ears, and I know that you were much better suited to provide an in-depth report there than I would be. So, thank you very much.
No worries.
Councillor Oberst and Councillor Carey.
Councillor Lopez stole my question.
Well, there you go.
But
MyNet.
that says I will just make a comment that after the years of hearing, people concerned over the MyNet situation, it's really nice to see a statement of pay 100% of their current debt, and from what Janet just said, we can start digging into the back debt as well. And I've always had faith in this company and that we would, eventually be able to pull things around such that it would begin to pay back the debt and 100% operating and, so on. And so I feel like we're really starting to cross that line now with the service to our outlying areas. And I think that's been the key. So, yay, keep going. to Minnet, and thank you so much for the good news.
Other John.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Janet, just a quick one, and I can't get back to the document because I'm technologically challenged and limited, both at the same time. But you noted, I believe the SDC funds are still noted as green, and but they are significantly below, if you look year over year, where they are current year, I guess would be the best way to say it. Clearly, this is not something that occurs and we gather on a regular basis, sort of a feast and famine thing, I would imagine. But do we have some things in the queue that are enough to allow you to keep that as green?
I feel that it is green because we are looking at our capital project cycle out, as you know, 5 years, and we are looking at spending down some of those SDCs. We may not, depending on development, we may or may not meet the budget / targets that we are showing here, but we seldom spend at that rate anyway. We have the best of intentions, and our eyes are bigger than our stomachs as far as the projects that we hope to complete. So at this juncture, I am not concerned. I know that development is, slowing down. There's no question. But I think that with what we've got sort of channeled through at least the next 5 years, we are still in decent shape. I don't know if our public works director would want to speak to the pace at which we're spending those dollars, but we do have other sources and resources at the moment too that's helping preserve them. So personally, I'm not that concerned, but what say you, Russ?
Yeah, I don't have a lot to add to Janet's comments, and I'm comfortable with the forecast as we've laid out. And there is some money that is floating out there in the way of grants that we've been able to, in some of those funds, take advantage of, and we'll be looking to try to take advantage of others, which will typically offset SDC expenditures as well. So.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily concerned either, but there's considerable talk, and will be more talk of lack of buildable lands and some of the things that might be limitations on development. So we'll just need to be moving forward with our eyes, I think, open, and I'm confident that we'll manage the resources at all levels well. But there's a bit of in my mind, a bit of a cautionary tale if we look further out. But again, as you said, Janet, we've got other resources that will be able to provide backstops if necessary. Thank you.
No problem.
Right. Yep. Thanks for that great question, Councillor Carey. Any others? All right. Don't need a motion. This is for our information only. So thank you, Janet, very much for that. And that does move us to Janet's second item this evening, which is the amendment of an existing intergovernmental agreement, Central School District 13J. I'll let Janet describe this for you.
Okay, well, that's me again. Thank you, Madam Mayor and council members. So I am very excited by this particular staff report and intergovernmental agreement. And I know it may not have excited you that much, but 5 years ago when I came to the city, I learned that we take checks from developers separate from their building permit fees, and we have them written to the school district, and we send them on to the school district, and our tracking mechanism for them was, I won't say it wasn't very robust, but it was very manual. And so this IGA needed to be updated in order to do something different. And so we are excited because 3 years ago, your building official and I put in place a new buildings software through the state, Acela, that will track construction excise tax payments and receipts and payments. And at that time, there was enough learning curve that we didn't implement it. However, with your new building official, he was excited to join in my enthusiasm. And so we met with your mayor in her other role and agreed that we needed to update this IGA and bring it into the 21st century. Even though it was written in the 21st century originally, but now we can do a lot of things electronically that, you know, we certainly couldn't do when we first signed this agreement. And so we've just proposed changing up a little bit the payment terms and how we pass them on, and doing an automatic deduction of the administrative fee at source so that we don't have to separately bill only annually to the school district. Again, it's just cleaning things up, making them more efficient, and making it more bulletproof that we know where those checks are. The developers and contractors are also excited by this because they don't have to necessarily make two separate payments anymore. And so I think it is, you know, it brings current a lot of the ORS references. Hopefully you had a chance to read it, but again, what this does is effectively, with your approval, kick off our ability to start using the Acela system to have a better relationship with the school district in getting these construction excise taxes over to them timely and getting our administrative fees timely. And with that, I would take questions.
Councillor McKeel?
Madam Mayor, this looks pretty obvious that we need to move this up, like what, the 20 years to the present. So I would just like to go ahead with the motion, if that's okay.
Sure.
I move to approve Resolution 1956, a resolution approving an amended and restated intergovernmental agreement between the City of Monmouth and the Central School District 13J to collect and remit construction excise tax.
Second.
Thank you, Councillor McKeel, for the motion, and Councillor Lopez for the second. Any questions? Councillor Carey?
Good idea. I think Carol nailed it just right on in terms of we need to move this forward quickly. The question that I have, are there any, you know, I noticed that 13J personnel would have access to the Acela system that they don't now, it sounds, which makes perfect sense as long as we have security in place, so we don't have any, you know, cybersecurity issues.
Right, and it is it's a browser-based software, and they would only have inquiry access. They could actually have had inquiry access now. It's just that they didn't have any reason to because the construction excise taxes weren't in the system. Currently, for example, the fire district has access, inquiry access, so that they can see things pertaining to fire life plan reviews, and also the county has access. And again, it's all tempered by the state's security over the browser, and it's fairly robust as I understand it, and a lot of entities in the state are using this software because it's supported by our 12% surcharge that we pay, or that the developers pay, and that we pass on to the state. So it's not within our control, I guess, to have the security done by us, but we're the ones that recommend, because it's our building permits, we're the ones that recommend what user access is. And so it would just be inquiry access for the school district employees.
Question, anything else? All right. Phyllis, can you please take the roll call?
Councillor Salinas Oliveros,
Aye.
Councillor Lopez,
Aye.
Councillor Carey,
Aye.
Councillor Oberst,
Yes.
Councillor McKeel.
Yes.
Passes 5-1.
Right.
5-0.
Resolution number 1956. Thank you very much. All right, that ends the work part, the business part. Now we get the work part. I am going to invite Suzanne Duffner, our Community and Economic Development Director, to the table. And she has a nice thick notebook with her,
That
as
was only part of
usual.
the file, but
One of her massive files. That project we are well familiar with. So Suzanne, our TGM Code Assistance Project.
yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. Good evening, members of the City Council. We have a work session for our third code assistance package that's been prepared by the consultants. If you recall, the council has discussed two other code packages that came before you in July and September that related to some changes to our residential codes and housing. We've talked about some of the commercial design standards and parking and ways to improve our code to make our city more walkable. This third set of proposed code changes relate to streamlining and cleaning up our code and our land use review procedures, and making sure that we meet the most recent state requirements and statutes. So pretty straightforward, some of it, but the devil's always in the details. So that's why we're having these work sessions, to go through it and make sure that it's saying what we want it to for the city of Monmouth before we move into adoption early next year in 2023. So the Planning Commission has had a work session on this in September and offered some comments on it. Those comments, to be clear, have not been incorporated yet into this draft. The consultant is taking all of the feedback, and then we'll be doing one big editing session after we also have a public open house on November 8th in this room at 5:30. If anybody's interested in attending that, to get some additional feedback from our community and from stakeholders that have been involved in the project. And we have an online open house that folks are providing comments and a survey as well. So we'll be taking all that great information and your feedback tonight and getting it into a final draft for another work session with the Planning Commission before we move to adoption. So that's kind of where we're at in this process. We're just looking at a slice of them again this evening. In terms of there's a lot of information there. Definitely wasn't planning to go page by page. I'd rather if you had specific edits that you want to talk about, and then I can also highlight some of the more, I guess, substantial issues that we talked about at the planning level. And there's a copy of the Planning Commission's meeting minutes in there as well, so you can kind of get a flavor for what they talked about during this work session. So with that, are there any specific items that folks want to had questions about? Or
Councillor Selena Solver.
Yes, okay, so I'm just really curious in some of the sections here. The zoning checklist, I do think that's a great idea. And I'm wondering if that checklist will be given up front to any of the applicants before their proposal, so they can also use it to see if they are meeting the requirements?
Yeah, that's a great question. And then are you on a specific page just for reference, or was it?
It's page 37
Okay.
on the screen, and page, it also says page 5 on the bottom. I don't know.
Yeah.
That it's 18.10.010 application types and review procedures.
Okay. Yeah, just want to make sure I'm on the right context there. So yeah, so what, just for a quick, by way of background, what the zoning checklist is meant and intended to do is for development that is more minor in scale, that doesn't necessarily trigger any of the Planning Commission review, like a design review, or and it's very little discretion in whether or not they meet standards. They're very black and white in the code. You either meet them or you don't. It's intended that those would be reviewed by staff through type 1 review procedures, and they would just be either they meet the standard or they don't. So it was, I think, written more as like an internal review checklist, but that's a good feedback to think on, like making it easier for, you know, the person that's trying to build their fence, for example, or their shed, that they know exactly which standards they need to meet and pulling those out of the massive code book so it's right there at their fingertips. So yeah, I mean, there's a companion piece that always goes along with these codes. There's the actual application forms and the, you know, the fee resolutions that help implement this. So yes, I think that is something that we can look at creating kind of a user-friendly checklist. We have something similar for formal land use applications. When they say go to do a conditional use, it tells them like, here's the criteria, and then here's the, you know, what you need to submit with your application. We don't yet have this kind of set of forms in place, so I will take note of that to look at making a handout that the user, the applicant, can have as part of that. Thanks.
And then I just, my other observation was the pre-application conference, and I'm trying to find the page number for that.
That's page 9 of the code.
Page 9. Oh, thank you.
18.10.035.
Thank you so much. So with the pre-application conference, I'm sure that when someone wants to submit a proposal or an application, that will be an option that's presented up front. My curiosity is, you know, how will somebody know that that option exists, that it's available if they want it, I guess.
Uh-huh.
And maybe it's too technical of a question. Like, I wouldn't know to ask for that.
Uh-huh.
And it's probably in the processes that you have. So I'm just curious about that piece.
It's a good point. It's something that I will offer or advise when I'm talking to somebody that calls into the city, but it strikes me that a lot of people are doing business. They're finding us on the web before they even call in, or if they have a hard time getting hold of somebody. So while we have the form on our website, again, I think that's a good, you know, looking at it from a user friendliness, you know, having like a little blurb that goes along with it that says, you know, if you need assistance, one of the ways to request that is through a pre-application conference. Yeah.
And one of the last things I think I have is when you're talking about the neighborhood review, requiring the neighborhood review, and that might be a topic of discussion. So I just, and I think that is 18.10.037.
Page
correct?
42.
Page 10.
Oh yeah.
So so for that one, and I think you're asking us for feedback when that should be used. I do think it should be more of like, I think it was the type 4, type 3, type 4, some of the higher impact applications. And would you mind reminding me about conditional uses? I see that was in there as well. Would you mind reminding me a little bit about the conditional uses?
Yeah, like what it is or what type of review it is.
Just because when I read that for the neighborhood review, anytime I think of neighborhood review, I get a tiny bit of anxiety, because I'm like, okay, are we keeping people out? Like, do we have this review because we're trying to decide who moves in? Or is it like you have it here, which is really well spelled out? And I like that, you know, it could have a real true impact to the neighborhood, whether it's traffic, parking, whatever it might be. That seems really good and really reasonable to have a neighborhood review. And then I just wanted a reminder of the conditional use, what that is, what would be considered conditional use.
Yeah, no, great questions. And yeah, these are all good. It's like I'm realizing we're expecting you to be kind of mini experts in what these applications are. It's a very technical matter, but conditional uses are uses that can be allowed in a zone if impacts can be mitigated so that it's compatible with the primary use of that. So the kind of easy example I like to give that is a school in a residential zone, right? Like residential zone is mostly for housing and what can be considered maybe lower impact uses, and then a school can bring with it, especially the size of the school, more traffic and parking issues. And so you don't want that use to be incompatible and take away from the character of the neighborhood. So running it through this conditional use process, it comes to the planning commission, there's notice to the neighbors, we have a public hearing, we may put conditions on that application to make sure that they've mitigated the parking and the noise and where the how things are laid out. So it's kind of like an extra review that we go through, and we do a more site specific analysis to make sure that the conditions are right for that development. And then under these proposed code changes, they would be classified as a type 3. And there's actually kind of a little handy table on page 7 or page 39 in the whole entire council packet that summarizes each of the land use application types and tells you, oh my goodness, some of these tools just make it so much easier to administer this code. I'm like, oh,
putting them in alphabetical
oh,
or having all the type 1s together and all the type 2s.
Yep, just to make it easy to find those. So
that's a good table.
Yeah. So under this, those would be a type 3, and that's where you picked up on a topic that I would consider a substantive issue that we are, also seeking feedback in the public meeting from the public on, is just where to set that threshold, because right now we don't require any applications to go to the neighbors and ask for, feedback on it before they file their formal land use application with the city. So this is definitely a change from what we're doing, and the intent is to try to get some of that neighborhood involvement and feedback through the plan development process before it hits the city, and it's all the way, the whole plans are like designed and step down the track. So definitely common to see that in things big like zone changes and subdivisions and like you're saying, things that can generate more traffic. And so we're struggling with, do you do all type 2, 3s and 4s, or just some of the type 3s and 4s, like if it's like the examples I was saying, the subdivisions over a certain size. We have conditional uses like daycare centers, and so it will add some time and potentially expense to having to process your application. So if we have a small daycare provider that's a nonprofit, it's going to end. They're trying to get more expanded space was one of the examples we talked about quickly, where there's a shortage of that. We'll, just trying to be aware and strike that balance of the burdens to the applicant and applications and the development review process and timeline and costs, and then also, like you're saying, do more involvement with the neighborhood. So yeah, so any feedback that the council has on that issue and where to strike, where that should be, whether or not we should have them, one, and if we should have them, what should we have them for? Design review was another one that we questioned. Should like each one of the S-curve, new development have to go through that, or was it just one for the master plan, and then each individual building wouldn't necessarily have to go through a separate neighborhood meeting each time they want to file a design review? It's a certain size threshold of a building. So that it's definitely a policy choice area on where you set that.
No, thank you. I really appreciate that. That's really great information and really good things to think about.
Yeah.
And how much time, how much money, how easy or not easy it's going to be for the applicant.
How development friendly or
how
business
many
friendly
times.
community is perceived as,
Yeah, but I like the idea of, the master plan and having that feedback for that. That's in the type 3 or type 4. And then once that is completed, I'm trying to think of, there's so many processes, but no, that's good. Thank you. I appreciate that information.
Yeah. I think that's great. I mean, we would find out if it's developer friendly after we did one.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
Yeah.
when you'll know whether or not
yeah.
they don't. It turns out to be a free for all.
I think we're so brave and innovative to, try to do something like this and really try to have that feedback from community and neighborhoods and trying to balance that out, like what we have control of, what can happen. So
Well, it's all the framing.
yeah,
Right? It's all the
yeah.
framing of why are we here? What are we
Mhm,
doing? This is
mhm.
why we're, and meet your developer and get to know these people investing in growing our community. And we want to get concerns out now rather than at the end of any process. So I think it's worth a shot for sure, but not on every little thing. Councilor Lopez, was that it? Sorry.
Yes, no, thank
Thanks.
you,
Great-
thank you.
Great
Appreciate it.
observation.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I had a couple follow-up questions to Councilor Salinas Oliveros's line there, and then I had a couple new questions of my own. My follow-up questions are regarding the neighborhood review. Are there other communities in our area that engage in a process like this? And if so, how does it go for them?
Yeah, that's a good question. I know Dallas has it, and maybe Lane can speak to their experience. I wasn't there too long to know, but I know they have for subdivisions over a certain size,
Yeah, and
or is it all
criteria,
subdivisions, like 20 lots
but
or
yeah,
more?
we do have
Yeah,
the types of applications that require a neighborhood meeting.
yeah,
And
yeah.
those are presented with the application, with the neighbors present. Any comments received are submitted as part of the record. And it gives the developer a chance to get some informal feedback from the neighbors before they hear it first in the hearing.
Right.
And a chance to modify their proposal if they need to buy peace with the neighbors. It seems to be a good process.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, I didn't hear too many like objections to. I didn't really hear any objections. I'd never like solved all the issues or problems. I don't want to say it's the magic bullet that makes everybody happy, but certainly does give that opportunity for a little bit more informal setting and feedback on that. And the city typically doesn't attend those. Like that's just
Right.
them. They set it up at a location that's
Yeah,
accessible
we
and
don't come to an agreement or understanding. At least everyone knows where.
yeah, or
You
understand.
go to the hearing,
Yeah.
and there's not that
What-
element usually then a surprise,
Right.
because you've had this conversation already.
Yeah. 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 So that's definitely one. And then the consultant, Sarah Breakstone, she was saying that it's not unusual to have that in other communities as well. I'm drawing a blank on some of the names of the communities that she was citing. So certainly, I think the larger cities which have organized neighborhood organizations, they're pretty common there as well. Salem, yeah. Hmm. Right. But they usually reserve it for more in-depth, not just like daily routine like applications, but more in-depth, larger scale projects.
Great, great, thank you. And to build on that, and I love that that Dallas sounds like they're using this process successfully. I do recognize that when adding processes like this, there can be an element of can be an element of gatekeeping at some points. And so this particular process is not within my wheelhouse, but wanted to ask if it's been kind of reviewed through an equity lens to make certain that it doesn't open ourselves up to to unintended consequences there, such as gatekeeping. And I'm thinking specifically about your example of a daycare, right? We all know that the Mid-Willamette Valley can be really a child care desert to an extent. I've had friends that have been on wait lists for months, looking for childcare. And what my concern is that this would give another opportunity, or an opportunity that doesn't currently exist, where some level of undue gatekeeping, right, for some of those needed services.
Yeah, and I guess my response to that would be, I mean, it could discourage, an applicant or a developer from moving forward, but it certainly doesn't, just because they had a negative experience or negative comments from that, that's not the decision or the criteria. It's
Yeah.
the process is, yeah, still the same, but I mean, at least it could lead a potential applicant, discourage them, I guess, before they even go through that process from applying. If they think, oh, just throw up my hands, the neighbors are going to oppose me and fight me the whole way. I'm not even going to bother. So that, yeah, and I think that's important where you choose to set that threshold of when you require the neighborhood.
Like I said, by the same token, again, there will be a public hearing, and
Yeah.
people who want to keep the gates will be at the public
Yeah.
hearing.
Right.
Yeah.
That's true.
So we're not creating
All right.
a new barrier here. We're creating really an opportunity, as Suzanne said, not always successful, but an opportunity to have the conversation to resolve some of the issues before you get to the hearing.
Yeah.
And that's where I was going to go, Chris, is those gatekeepers are going to show up. If you leave this process out, they're still going to show up at the hearing and do their best to keep the gate. If instead you give them a chance to speak in advance, you might be able to address some concerns before you get to the hearing side of things.
Oh, yes.
Okay. And that's the beauty of this process is let's go ahead and get the objections on the table if there are any, so we can perhaps ameliorate them here before we get to the official procedure.
I appreciate and agree with that, and I see all the good that this can do. I just want to make certain that we look at it through an equity lens and don't unintentionally open ourselves up to potential negative consequences that don't currently exist. That's all I'm asking. But it sounds on the whole it sounds great. My couple questions that are original comments here. There's one area, and just on a real high level, there's one area that speaks to a new process, potentially adding fees, to potential new forms created by some of the changes within this. And I can cite pages and specifics, but as opposed to going into the details there, I just want to make sure that these changes are all accomplishing kind of the goals of us, the overarching goal of us doing this and increasing transparency while at the same time streamlining some of these processes that can be streamlined. Once again, this isn't my area of expertise. If you tell me that it does, I believe you. But wanted to just double check some of those things. And I have page numbers. I went back through and wrote down page numbers. If that helps. The mention of fees was on page 2. The new forms are on page 9 and 22.
Yeah.
And these were all call outs in kind of the comment section along the side as
Uh-huh.
well. So
That's
they're
great.
easy to locate.
Right. And I think one of the parking determination and the modifications to existing applications, those, are called out as like new applications here. The parking determination is for when the code may be silent on a particular use and what the parking ratios are for that. They can apply for that to get a determination of what the right size parking, or if they believe that the code parking requirements are not representative of their particular type of use because there's something different or unique about it. So it's actually providing some more flexibility to our code. So hopefully we can keep those fees reasonable so it doesn't discourage the use of that. The modifications that would actually potentially save an applicant money if there was a smaller modification fee rather than having to reapply with the entire fee of, like, for example, you need to modify your subdivision rather than having to submit a whole new subdivision. You can submit for a modification of that if it meets certain criteria. So
that helps me sleep better at night.
Okay. Yeah, I think so. I mean, if you see something else that you have questions about on that, please, let me know. But hopefully that will make our code easier to use and build in some of that flexibility for situations that we can't always anticipate or write long enough code to address some of those specifics.
Excellent. Thank you.
The forms you said were on pages.
Oh,
9.
I'm sorry. Forms, yeah, thank you. Forms page 9 and 22. Pre-application waiver request form 22. So that was page 9, and then page 22 is sorry, lots of scrolling here.
Major modification.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
Modification, yeah.
And so I assume that these things are, in lieu of other forms that would be, other processes that would be more laborious. But once again, it's just not my area of expertise, and I want to just fact check that with you.
Yeah, great concerns about that. And yeah, I don't think the pre-app waiver request form is a new fee. There's no new fee associated per se with that. It's
Just the one fee, but then a
right,
couple new forms.
but trying to
as well.
make
And we all know
the
time is
form-
money.
Oh yeah, sure. The point is well taken. I'm trying to make them as efficient and easy to fill out as possible.
Okay. Others, Councillor Oberst.
Suzanne, there's a number of spots along here that in the comment column where it's planning commission discussion and then a question. Are they asking for our input, or is that a rhetorical question? For example, on page 5, speaking about things that are subject to type 1 procedures. Are these appropriate applications to be reviewing under the new type 1 process? Staff identified home occupations, minor partitions, and historic alterations as potential type 2 reviews. So are they asking for our input on that?
Yeah,
Or is that
those were
M&M?
specific topics that were brought up at the planning commission level to get feedback on, kind of considered more substantive issues. So certainly if there are comments or feedback from the council on
Okay.
those.
I just wondered if, is there a flat out request? We'd like to hear what council thinks about these things. And if so, do we need to, sort of structure a discussion around those now or in the future? And then you and I had a back and forth online about page 17, which talks about site plan reviews. And specifically, there's no site plan review requirement except as follows. You have to have a site plan review except as follows: single detached dwellings, a duplex, triplex, townhome, or cottage cluster. And what you determined for me was that while duplexes can go anywhere, triplexes and townhomes are limited to MX,
RM,
medium, and high.
RH.
Whereas the cottage clusters could conceivably come into an existing single neighborhood. And I just wanted to throw out, is that something that maybe is deserving of a site plan review if you're going to possibly, and you told me it was could only occur on a 9,000
square foot minimum lot size,
yeah,
which is a
pretty good size lot.
Pretty good size lot. You don't see too many of those.
Especially in today's terms.
Yeah.
Some of the older neighborhoods in town have 9,000 square foot lots walking around. So, it's something to pay attention to. And is that going from a single dwelling to, conceivably somebody coming in and tearing down a house and replacing it with 4 houses or 3 houses, is that worthy of a neighborhood meeting and or a site plan review because it has an impact on the neighborhood? Just throwing that out there. Maybe that's a question back to the planning commission. Maybe that's a question for us. I don't know. I just wanted to make sure that, sort of flag that as something that we might want to talk about. And other than that, this took me about 6 sessions to get through. And I thought, man, Suzanne sits there day after day doing this all day long. And this just working through this whole document in all 3 parts has significantly increased my already high regard for the work you do.
Well, it's worth it to get a better code in the end. That's what my motivation is. It's so bad the way it is now that I was like, hang in there.
That because I know that we have had some major clunky things in code from top to bottom. Stuff that has been floating around since the 50s, and I'm thinking the 1850s. So, you know, in places in the code, I mean, council can't talk about alcohol by our charter, so there you go. Yeah,
Yeah,
and, you
there
know,
has been a
so,
lot of time. I know Lane has provided us some feedback with
right.
the consult meeting. So that's what's making a better product, though, is having those extra sets of eyes and extra time reviewing it.
Right.
So
Well,
yeah,
I'm
appreciate that.
gonna step back and let anybody else answer any questions. I'm just gonna scan and see if there are any of those other planning commission questions
Yeah, that
that
would be great.
are
This
worth
would be a good
flagging
time to try to, yeah, address
while
those.
we're all here.
Counselor McKeel, then Counselor Carey.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Duffner. I was wondering in the notifications, we kind of talked about that a little bit, but it looks like the notifications, there's some discrepancies, which I'm wondering would like confuse people as to how much time they should be notifying neighbors. And maybe it's just that I'm not understanding how the code is moving from one type and one hearing to another. But I found like the type 2 here, the type 2 would be on page 13 of your document, page 45 of the council notes. It says you have 14 days to respond to a mailer. And then later on, you go down to page 15 of the code document and page 48 of the council. And it has, for type 2, it's the notice of public hearings section. And it says for type 2 actions, such notice will be at least 20 days before the hearing. So I'm wondering if maybe I just don't understand it. And I don't know if my internet is even working. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yep,
Yep.
we can hear
Okay.
you. So I saw where
We're
you
look-
pointed out the 14-day notice for the type 2 actions, and then where would you cite for the
The
20?
type 2, yeah, the
Oh,
one with 20 days is under notice for public hearings, 18.10.05. It's on page 15 of the code document, page 48 of the council document.
mhm.
So it's so, but you know, maybe it's two types of things, but I'm wondering if it's two types of things, then it's confusing enough that maybe somebody, you know, maybe that needs to be spelled out more, because anyway. And the other, there was also what I thought was probably, it'd be nice if it was like the same time all the way along the road, because there's also like the type 4 is 20 days, and I like the 20 days. But if you put something in the newspaper, it's only 10 days. So there's like all kinds of timelines for notification for people.
Yeah,
So
some of them. Oh, go ahead.
right, no, go ahead.
Oh, okay. I was just going to say, yeah. So that is pretty customary to organize land use application types by these 1, 2, 3, 4 actions, 4 being the kind of the biggest impact and most discretion. Those go up to council. And so it's pretty common to have different notice timelines that run with each one of those. And some of them are minimums set by the state land use requirements, that we can't go below those. I guess we could, increase the notification timeline, but yeah,
Well,
so the type, the type
no,
2 one,
yeah, it looks like the type 2 is, there's a discrepancy anyway.
yeah, I was looking closer at that one, and that, I know that was kind of modeled after a we call them limited land use decisions, where there's no hearing, but there's a 14-day comment period, like say a home occupation goes through. So I'm wondering if when we kind of rejiggered the types, if maybe we got off on the ones that have a hearing versus don't. So I will definitely go back and make sure that we don't have, because if there is a 20-day notice, then it makes sense to have, that the comment period be equal with that. So I think it's just off, like I said, from when we kind of move these around under our current code. But it's a good catch. I'll have to study that a little bit
I
closer.
will want to look at that. The type
Uh-huh.
2 decision is initially a staff
This
decision.
is the staff. Okay, so it sounds like a limited
Yeah,
land
it's not a
use.
discretion.
Oh, okay.
Type
So there's no
2
hearing. So
no hearing.
yeah.
Yeah, type
Okay.
2 is designed initially
Yeah.
to be decided without a hearing. And so a notice goes out that the planning director has his application. This is on page 13 of the code. That triggers the 14 days to respond with written comments. It's not a hearing, it's just written comments.
Right.
And then there's an opportunity for an appeal of a type 2 decision, in which case then the appeal is heard
That's
as
the
a
20-day notice.
type
That's
3
different.
hearing.
Yeah.
And that
Okay.
follows
That makes more
the
sense.
standard type 3
Yeah.
hearing notice process. So it looks confusing, but if you follow the application longitudinally through the process, it all works very
Different
well.
timelines.
Yeah.
That you're meeting.
There are different timelines for different steps in the process.
Yeah.
And there's really it's not streamlining to make those the same, because they're not on top of each other.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact,
So, and
make
then on the app,
a 20-day notice for the type 2 would actually slow the process down at the front end by requiring that extra time for the planning director to make a decision.
so I guess then if they fill out an application, that's all going to be obvious in the application, so the code won't be confusing to them, I guess, then.
There is generally a summary. I'll have to go back and look at each one of the application forms. That'll be one of the implementation once this gets adopted, is to go back and revise those. But yeah, and that's generally spelled out when we meet with the applicant about the process. So yeah, but good point.
So another thing, sorry, and it's just kind of an OCD thing, or maybe it's like for the type 3 that says you need to put a sign up on the property, and the sign has to be 22 inches by 34 inches. But a type 4, the sign has to be 90 square inches. And I'm like, can they be just the same?
Yeah.
Sorry, it's like, wait, all of our signs look different. So
yeah, well, we usually order them at the same time, so I'm not sure how that language escaped me. I was like, I think we should make them consistent sizes, how we've kind of done it right now. So that's a good catch.
So I have a couple more here. Okay, sorry. There's a couple that I had caught in there, and I can just skip those now because I put them up into the notice thing. So when people have to put up those notices on the property, right now it says, and it's on page 11 of the code, 43 of the council document, and item E3, a written statement containing the information posted on the property. But I think this was probably written back when you couldn't really do photographs and put them into a document very easily. And I think maybe it would be a better documentation that there had been postings of a written statement on the property if they included a photograph of the sign that was posted. Just kind of a new way of doing things because everybody's got a phone now that you can take pictures. And I know this because I can take pictures really quickly as my grandchildren. So I had to get that in there. Does that make sense?
It's E3.
E3. It's on page 11 of the code document. And all it's asking is the petitioner, have a written statement containing the information posted on the property. But I think documentation of a sign that is posted is better to have a photograph of the sign that was put up.
Yeah, I'd agree. That's an easy.
And then
I would make that in 4 though.
What's that?
As part of the affidavit.
As part of the affidavit.
If you're going to do that.
Strike 3 and put a photo as part of 4.
Yeah, an affidavit. You include a photograph in that.
So the other one that I have is with, do we need, so, and maybe I'm getting into the, maybe I'm not getting into the intent of this, but on page 11 of the code document, on item F, it says failure of property owner to receive notice shall not invalidate the neighborhood review meeting proceedings. But in that section, the notice of the public meeting wasn't being sent by the city, but being sent by the petitioner or the applicant. And it even has a thing that says the applicant can request the list of addresses. There's a lot of honor code stuff in there. And so is that, I'm worried about something that is an honor system where the applicant, you know, we're counting on the applicant to send out letters to all the homeowners in that area. And if they don't send it out to all of them, they just send it out to a few of them, then property owners will have no recourse because they didn't, it says there in item F, if you don't get the notice, well, you can't do anything about it. But because the city didn't send the notices, it's the honor system that the applicant sent the notice. Does that make sense?
Lane?
Yeah, that it is standard for the applicant to send the notice, and actually the applicant is highly motivated to notify everybody, because if they do not notify someone, then that person has appeal rights that extend from 21 days from the date that they receive actual knowledge of the land use action. And so typically a developer is going to want to notify everybody so that at the end of the hearing, you have a decision and everybody has 21 days from that decision to appeal. And if they don't appeal, the developer knows that they've got the green light to go. If they haven't notified somebody, they're not sure that that 21-day appeal period is ever up, or when it expires. And so in this case, it's not just an honor system. It's because of that right to appeal when you did not receive notice. It's actually a penalty on the developer not to give notice to everybody, because it really leaves their approval uncertain in terms of its finality.
So it doesn't affect the neighborhood review meeting proceedings,
Right.
but it will affect them later on down the line.
Yeah.
And what I was going to interject, Lane, is just that, again, this is the neighborhood review meeting. This does not take away a property owner's rights in the big picture hearing process,
Sure.
approval, LUBA stuff.
Yeah.
This is just this small little slice that we're adding about the neighborhood review meeting.
Yeah.
And somebody who doesn't get that notice but does hear about the process, they can still weigh in.
Yeah.
Yeah, they get public comment.
Generally, developers are motivated to notify because it creates more problems not to give notice at any of these steps.
Right.
Okay. And so I kind of in that same vein, there's on page 14 of the code document, 46 of the council document, in section ID, I.D. Written notice for all type 2 and type 3 decisions shall be sent to the applicant, adjacent property owners within 250 feet, etc. But there wasn't in that section, and maybe this is probably my misunderstanding, but it seems that there is, I'm just going to write what I wrote down in my notes. If there is adjacent property, why isn't there a meeting notice sent to the property owners? In this section, there appears to be nothing about inviting property owners for type 3. And on page 10, item 2, it states the neighborhood meeting is for type 3 review or higher. So it looks like it's leaving out the neighborhood meeting in this section.
This is about the decision.
Yeah, but it has the decision, but prior to the decision, it doesn't talk about the neighborhood meeting. So what it does say, though, is it's communication 18.10.06, and that doesn't seem to be the right communication number. versus maybe it'd be better to use 18.10.05 that does talk about a neighborhood meeting. And I'm hampered because I don't have my let me see if I can go to that. I'm not working with the monitor, so let's see if I go to this. So I is crossed off and D. So it has written notice in this whole section. If you look above this section, it doesn't, so it talks about type 3 actions, but it doesn't talk about any community meeting, neighborhood meeting prior to talking about notification of the decision. And again, maybe I don't understand how this is fitting into the bigger picture.
Yeah, I think it's because there's a separate section that talks about the neighborhood meetings and the process for notification for that. So that's the applicant or the developer's first step before they would apply for one of these type 3 actions. And then once they've had that neighborhood meeting, there's no decision made at that, right? So then they apply for their type 3 application. That starts our whole city provides that 20-day notice. We have the meeting. After the meeting, then a written decision's issued. So they're kind of two separate timelines that I think it's talking about there.
Yeah, we're not, it is going chronologically rather than everything that you would do under type 3, because the neighborhood review meeting says this will be type 3 and above, but we may want to add other things, for example,
Yeah,
conditional use.
So I guess sorry.
We want to keep it its own section.
Yeah, so if I go up and look at the type 2 actions, and this is where this comes from, I'm sorry, is in on page 13. So just going up a page on where is it? In item B, it talks about sending something out to the adjacent property owners, and they have 14 days to decide. And then in item E, so this is the type 2 action, now it says the decisions will be mailed. All right, so then using this as a kind of a template, going down to type 3 actions, I would expect to see the same kind of thing, that there's notification of adjacent property owners, and then there's notice about the decision. But there's nothing about letting the property owners know like you do in type 2.
I'm following you now.
Yep.
You said you are following me or not?
Yeah, no, I am. I was
Yep.
just looking to see if it had if it's stuck in a different section or where that is.
I think item D mentions written notice sent to property owners within 250 feet. So 14D under type 2 does specify written notices sent.
But that's in it's the decision. It's not not the
Yeah, instead of like before the Oh, notice for public hearings. We didn't go far enough.
Yeah, right. It's 050.
It's on
notice for public
15.
hearing.
Yeah. So it's in 18.10.050, page 15 or 47 in the entire packet.
Yeah, so but I think if you go back to type 3, my note that I had was it doesn't use the 51, it uses the 61, which doesn't include that. Where is it?
51 versus 61. I'm not sure I know what that.
Now I can't see it. Well, I don't want to take up more time. Oh, yeah, there it is in B, application review. There it is. Application review, type 3 application shall be heard by the planning commission or historic commission at a public hearing according to, and that's 18.10.06, which does not talk about having notice to adjacent property owners. So .06 doesn't talk about that like .05 does.
Do we have an incorrect?
Well, no, I think 060, you don't have that in the materials. I think 060 describes the process of the hearing itself.
Oh.
So 050 stands by itself. 060 is again, you don't have it in these packets. But I think
Right, but there's
060
no
is
reference
the hearing
though.
process.
I'm sorry. What was that?
Yeah, we don't have 060 in these meeting materials, but I think 060 is the code section that describes the process for the hearing itself, when you're in the hearing. 050 stands by itself in terms of requiring prior notice, but 060 describes the process of the hearing.
Yeah, conduct of public hearings,
Yeah.
what it is in our existing.
Yeah, and I thought I looked that up, actually.
I think I see what Councillor McKeel is saying here, that it's not pointing to 050, but it does point to 060. So if you follow it logically, type 3 here points to 060 that then triggers 050. Should we just notate that it's tied to 050 as well for clarity?
You could say, in accordance with the provisions of MCC 1810-060, after notice pursuant to 1810-050. Yeah.
That would work, because right now I see nothing about a notice. Yeah,
It's just, that would just be signpost. The notice is, I shouldn't say signpost because we're talking about posting notice. That would just be that would just be a signal, because 050 already requires the notice, whether you call it out or not. But that's fine.
Talk about nailing it to the sign.
Something to think about anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, these are great things. I'm sure they're helpful, and maybe we can keep working on that individually. If you notice those things, to go to Suzanne and Lane. So if you catch any more of those little things, not
They'll
Lane.
come to me.
Lane said, "Don't copy him, just Suzanne."
So I would be happy to do that. I do have one about that is about like the policy itself. And it's on page 23 of the code, 55 of the council. And it says item V, for middle housing, provide occupancy and use data quantifying conditions of the on-street parking system within one block of middle housing development. And I thought that's a long way to be from someone's home. Does that say we don't care if they can't find a place to park by their home except for a block away? That's kind of like New York City.
What page again, Carol?
Page 20, 23 of the,
Okay,
sorry,
got it.
20,
Thank
okay.
you.
Talking about parking determinations and what criteria staff will use to evaluate and approve these. And one of them is looking at the occupancy and utilization data for on-street parking within a block of one of the middle housing developments. And so I think it's using that one block as kind of that's a walkable distance to consider somebody would park and then be able to walk to their dwelling. I guess you could define it as shorter. I mean, usually for parks planning, we use a quarter of a mile to half mile for a walkable distance, but I'm not sure if I understand what your concern is, that that's too big of an area to consider. It should be smaller, or it should be larger.
Yeah,
Larger would be hard to get more data.
yeah, I think it should be smaller. It's like that was what we had when I lived in a city and there were like 1 million people with apartments and stuff. But I don't think that's the kind of neighborhood environment we have in Monmouth. So I think it's kind of on the long side. I would say like within a half a block, because blocks are, my blocks are really long. If I was a block away, I'd be going back and forth with my groceries 10 times, and I'd have my pedometer all set that day. I think it's just long, but I could be the lone voice here, and that's okay. And I've already used up a lot of time with other things of my concern.
Other good things, but yeah, one block seems reasonable. And again, we have some older blocks that are way different than new blocks, and how many cross streets are a block. And so I feel
We
like,
could define block as a
yeah,
As a
distance instead of
distance.
as a corner.
Yeah.
one block doesn't seem unreasonable.
And maybe that's better. I like Counselor Ober's. It's like maybe it's a distance instead of a block, because yeah, you're right. Blocks are all very different sizes.
Depending on which side of the street you're on in my neighborhood, a block is either 0.2 of a mile or it's not.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, you're
Yeah.
on your
know.
street.
Yeah, you could say it's 500 feet or something like that, so that
Dr.
normalizes it.
Seaver's side of the street comes in 3 blocks. My side had 1
Yeah.
all the way down.
Yeah, he's got no blocks.
Yeah, I flag that to look at maybe if there's a specific distance.
Find what
Okay.
block is
It'd
in
be
terms
easier-
of feet.
It would be easier to apply consistently.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, Carol, we'll find some feet distance to use instead there.
Okay, and then I'll get my pedometer out there and check it out.
All right.
And that's it. That's all I had.
Thank you.
Councilor Carey's
Good,
got
Counselor Carey.
Thank you. Good discussion here. I'm going to circle back on just a couple that I hope, and they don't necessarily need resolution tonight, but Suzanne, perhaps you could just make a note. And I don't have the advantage of being able to, I wish I could tell you the chapter and verse and page and all of that. So I'll try to be as descriptive as I can. Early on in this discussion, we had the discussion of the pre-application conference, and I think that's good. That happens. One of the things that I wondered about is, there's a waiver of that. Should that be, well, there's a process that pre-conference could be waived. The rationale was very thin on that. It didn't require any traffic. There was a form filled out, and the planner agreed and gave them a decision. I wonder if that could be, because I think a waiver of that, it may just be by mutual agreement of both parties, would be enough to do away with the requirement of that meeting if it's sort of perfunctory. They've done it a million times. So it just didn't seem like there was much substance behind that, and there it might be improved if, just in terms of the document, if there was. So I don't need any comment on that necessarily. You can just make a note and decide whether it's a good idea or not. The whole discussion on the neighborhood meetings, is really a true policy decision that we will need to make along the way. But short of making a recommendation on that or my own feelings on that, I wonder if there would be value to having a city staff person in attendance at that meeting. Now, I understand it's a grassroots type thing and all of this. There are invariably going to be questions that are going to come up, and somebody with the development code facts and Oregon administrative rules might be able to assuage some concerns there. It certainly could be, they could be there in an ex officio role, as in an information role. But I guess I don't know. Seems like that would be a good idea. It sounds like they're doing it in other places without any staff. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that
That's my
Dallas,
experience.
example doesn't have them there.
But I guess as I read the rationale for the neighborhood meeting, I thought it would be good to have someone there that, sort of that was able to, talk about what was real. Yes, you really can put a duplex into a formerly, low density residential lot. It's going to be news to people. I don't know, just a thought, not looking to make any work for anyone else. And also, Suzanne, probably just an editorial note in that neighborhood meetings section. Again, I don't have it, but there's a section called posted notice. It's item D, I believe.
Yep.
I just, my references here are cryptic.
You're okay.
It talks about 7 days prior to the open house. I think it probably 7 days prior to the neighborhood meeting, perhaps. That the open house didn't seem congruent somehow.
Oh, okay. Yep. Yep, we can change that.
Easy enough. And then the parking is going to be an issue, and as we began to look at minimizing the requirement for off-street parking, if we do that, that makes me wonder if parking decisions might need to be elevated to a level 3. Currently, they're noted in the list of level 2s, but there's some explanation. There could be some positive discussion on that if there were a neighborhood meeting. And currently at level 2, that's not required. So that might be something we could give some consideration to, as we look at this. And then if we look down at the approvals, down at the bottom of the parking section, and again, feel terrible that I can't direct people any more closely. And it's talking about variations of parking requirements and so on. And item C under the approval category, meaning that it must be true to be approved, the reduction of off-street parking will not adversely affect on-street parking. If I'm reading that right, I don't know how that's possible. I mean, if you're going to minimize the requirement, for less off-street parking, they're going to likely go to on-street, and there'll be an adverse effect. So to me, as I read that in my note on the side of the, my notes here is that's the poison pill for the whole deal. I mean, it won't be able to be done, and that's not the intention. We need to have a way to get there on this, but I felt like that is one that we need to modify the language, because otherwise it'll never fly. Anyway.
You're suggesting deleting that criteria or criterion?
For approval.
Okay.
See, that's item C for the approval. In other words, I understand why we're doing this,
Right.
but that seems to, I don't know, maybe I read it wrong, and I can't get back to it.
Yeah, you'd have to make a pretty weird case to.
Well, I think, if there's a case that I guess I could see where it may not have an adverse impact is if their parking demand is truly lower. So if it's, a senior, housing development, for example, where the residents don't all drive cars and we're lumping them under the same parking requirement as any multifamily apartment project, they may not have that same demand. So that's what this process is intended for, folks to be able to make their case like, hey, we're a different type of normal use that's listed in your parking that may have higher parking impacts. So
Hardly have
good
to go through
point.
all the rest of it. Then they could just say this won't adversely affect this because next.
But if you think that criterion is too rigid. I mean, it would certainly make it easier to get one of these approved if you didn't have to take any of that into account.
I think there's still enough. I mean, you can take that into consideration, but to make that definite statement, I see what John's saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty declarative, you know,
The
and,
re-
and I think your example is a great one, Suzanne, and that would be certainly reason for approval. As long as we don't write ourselves into a corner. Anyway, good enough. That's good for me. Thanks.
Yeah, maybe a different way to word that. Good. Thanks, John. All right. Anything else catch your eye, Counselor Oberst?
Just to go back to a little bit of what I looked at, and I'm going to go back to page 5 of the document. And that was that question I raised earlier. And I just would love to hear if council has any feelings about this. And that was, there it is, appropriate applications to be reviewing under type 1 and should, in fact, home occupations, minor partitions, and historic alterations go to type 2, where they would potentially be run past the planning commission for review and decision in the public hearing. So I just wanted to make sure that we can give planning commission help on that if they're asking for it.
Page 37 of our docket.
Right. Yep.
There's a comment PC, Planning Commission discussion.
Yep.
And the minutes reflect that the planning commission did believe that agree with home occupations, minor partitions, and historic alterations, because they do usually have some discretion involved, especially putting conditions on them, that those be placed in type 2 was their recommendation. So yeah, I'd be curious to know if you agree with that or not.
So it's less are these appropriate than saying these should be.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That I didn't get to read. their minutes. So sorry about that.
Oh yeah, no worries. I was just going to share with you kind of what they thought.
Page 10 of the document, which is our page
42.
Thank you. What is an appropriate threshold for requiring a neighborhood review meeting? It could be required for any application that has a pre-app meeting or for only larger and more impactful projects like subdivisions, conditional uses, and design reviews. Does anybody have any input there?
Yeah, and again, what have they discussed? I know you asked this earlier, but just to clarify, they didn't give us their input. They're just asking for our input, or they do have thoughts about this to share with us.
And what sorts of things, Suzanne, might be less large that require a pre-app meeting, but that maybe don't require a neighborhood meeting? Can you think of an example that maybe has gone by in the last?
Example would probably be Carl's Jr. on the that parcel triggered the need for a pre-app because it had a traffic impact analysis. So any development that triggers the need for a traffic impact analysis has to do a pre-app with staff, and we have specific thresholds like trip counts and access issues on a highway that will trip the need for a traffic impact analysis. So, if that is like, it's a smaller building footprint, but yet it had this traffic impact analysis, that's an example of one. Didn't have necessarily a master plan with it because it's like one parcel, like where you set the threshold on that.
So how would you balance that? Do you feel like that should have a neighborhood meeting, or is it what's your feeling?
Yeah, one of the ways that we talked about, because we didn't quite get to 100%, I think, resolution on where that comfort level is yet at the planning commission. We asked to see some more examples of that and some language. in the next draft and flag that for some further discussion. Yeah, again, I struggle with that. We have an economic development strategy and we're trying to promote economic development and a positive business climate. That could be tricky, for the smaller ones. I am in agreement with the ones that are a master plan and
Sure.
have, a zone change or, larger impacts associated with that. But kind of the individual ones, the traffic analysis has to go through a rigid review process with the traffic engineers, with the city, with ODOT. So it feels like more of a technical
That's
review
fair.
on that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I wouldn't tend to put those into that neighborhood category. But,
Anybody else have any thoughts on any of that?
Well, I think here it says type 3 or higher for the appropriate threshold. And I agree with what Ms. Duffner was saying, some of and I do see that the examples, larger impact, more impact projects, conditional use. I think that's a good list as a guide. I think if we become too nitpicky, we're going to have like tons of neighborhood meetings about smaller projects, and it's just going to discourage things, and it's just going to prolong those developments. And I mean, to me, it has to have a significant impact, or it's going to make it for it to count as a neighborhood review process. Because we talked earlier about gatekeepers, I mean, we're just going to create more barriers if we go any lower than that. So I would prefer what we have here. Yeah, it is a high threshold, so I prefer that.
And I think this is a question for clarification on page 18 of the document 50 of our packet, talking about design review for new and major redevelopment of commercial structures in the 3 districts required below. And design review is also required for multifamily projects that do not meet the clear and objective standards for multifamily development. And it says this sets up a 2-track process. One track is clear and objective and the other is discretionary. Is that something we're kind of almost stuck with, or is that something that needs to be clarified?
Yeah, we are stuck with that. That's
okay.
Recent housing.
It's just the way it is.
Legislation on that.
And then the last one that was sort of this hanging question, I'm going to make everybody scroll a mile because it's page 37 of the document, which is page 69 of our packet. And there's the general question of new industrial uses, because we used to have this list that says, well, you can do this, but you can't do that. And two of the things might be very similar, but we were going to allow one and not the other. And now we have a much more generalized table of what is allowed or conditional use or outright not allowed in the various zones. And so is everybody comfortable with this new approach? I think is a worthwhile thing that council should weigh in on. I'm thrilled myself to see this approach because the old one talked about things that almost don't exist anymore because technology is a thing. And at the same time, it had these huge holes that didn't address stuff that is a thing because technology is a thing. And so I'm in favor of a much more flexible and general approach here. I just wanted to make sure that council had caught that comment and so on.
Talked about that early on. I agree.
And the planning commission had a pretty robust discussion, though. They were also in favor of moving more towards these general use categories for that very reason that Councilor Oberst mentioned. But at the same time, being wary of things that we may be unintentionally letting in that may be very, environmentally degrading or have, things that were prohibited under our current industrial codes. And so going back and just checking those specific uses. Feedlots. I'm trying to think of some specific examples. For example, maybe, yeah, wanting to be clear that there are certain things that are prohibited, in some of those zones. So we had a whole nother meeting just to go back and look at those and clarify some of that language. Or there was just silly stuff like marine yards that we have no marinas in that I know of. I mean, maybe 50 years from now they'll figure out the big one will shake that up, right? So some that just weren't relevant examples. Railroad's probably not coming back. Yeah, ship launching. Right.
Taste from somebody
Elon may come to town yet.
Oh gosh.
Along
that's the
along
level.
I-5 near Boardman, for the longest time, there was a zone in Morrow County zoned space age industrial.
Whoa!
Because they envisioned that as the place that NASA was going to come and develop. So there is a zone that turned it into a motorsports raceway, but launched for 35 years. Space age industrial.
That's cool. That's
You
fun to
want
put in
that.
archives.
Talk about specific.
Yeah.
Might be.
Wow.
Little too overly
I try to be silly and you tell me it's
Yeah.
already been done.
All right.
Okay.
Great. Good. Excellent work. Thank you.
And
Oh, thank you.
Thank
Really
you
good feedback.
for
And
the
thank you
good night's
for-
sleep.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
And
this is
insomnia.
great.
Just
And,
go and read
you
that
know,
tonight.
Kudos to the planning committee as well.
Yeah.
Good work. Thank you.
There's more to come on that for sure. So-
promise
yeah,
her at the
every
back.
little bit helps us keep moving along in it.
Right.
So it's great.
Yep. Very good.
That's great. We have left our standing reports, council comments, and then we do have an executive session this evening regarding real property transactions. So do we want to take a 5-minute break at this point and come back? 5 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay. I have 8:22, so 8:27. Let's try to reconvene.
Rightio.
We're so efficient.
So exciting. Not election night.
Oh.
my
Heaven has to deal with that.
Oh.
Oh, wait, yeah. So is Dallas
Next
Planning
week.
Commission, unfortunately.
Oh, sorry.
I know it. Yeah,
Jared, I don't even
this is the
about it.
first time.
I'm not even gonna.
At least we know Monday will be in.
I know. I'm so happy about that. Oh wow! Oh my god! How is it? Is it helping? Oh my god!
Nice.
All the soft tissue and
That's so
forward
great, John.
and push off.
Just not to have any additional.
Yeah, so I'm still getting used to it. I think I may go back and ask for just a little bit of padding under the arch.
Oh, I'm so happy for you.
Yep. So nice got away from me. Nah. But I like my vodka cold.
I knew it.
Oh goodness. Oh goodness.
Wow. Oh, are you and Sarah taking good care of yourselves?
Oh,
I think of you
trying.
so often.
Trying. It's been.
Oh gosh,
Been rough,
it's so
but
hard.
yeah.
It is so hard, and you just. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. There's no right or wrong way, and you just
There's
do what
no good
don't.
way. I was just
And
looking
say
at the
no.
offerenda here. I need to bring
Yeah.
something of his in.
Just, we'll always remember. And that's the best thing.
Yeah.
Best thing. I brought a little thing for my dad. We have so many family and so many friends. And I'm like, I could bring a candle. I could probably fill this up. And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay. We'll be lighting candles. Jack wasn't here on
Oh,
today.
sorry. Yes, I said our reports, council comments.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's, the best thing.
Don't leave, buddy.
Yeah.
It's
Right now, we're just trying
And you have to leave the camera up though too.
Yeah, the only thing I can take down is the laptop.
Huh?
The only thing I can take down. The only thing I can take down.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll have to put it away. About election night, this is like the first year ever. This is, that's what. Well, it's their term.
That's a lot of things.
I see what the
Right, which was now isn't necessarily right.
It is. It's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you know,
No. Plastic. That's just a portion of our rotating, rotating. It's amazing. Come along, I've only had it for a week.
Process. You know, it's also process. Yeah. So I've been pushing it. Things that have a place and be in that place again. So trying to work back into work life again. A lot. And sometimes I'm running, but yeah.
All right, our friends are returning online.
Wow.
Trying to rein us in.
Bunch of slackers out
I know.
here.
Oh,
Bunch
no.
of slackers.
It says, reload. Oh, snap. Mine says, oh, snap. Let's see what GoToMeeting says.
That's what it did to me before me download thing. Oh, see, it wouldn't even give me an option to do it in the browser. It made me download like the I didn't even know there was an application.
That's weird.
Okay, back.
Interesting name. All right. We're back. And I have a brief report that just really talks about what a great event we had last night. Actually, the Monmouth Business Association with their full back in swing Halloween spectacular event was a great deal of fun. Many businesses on Main Street handing out candy. Warren Street was closed off, so we had businesses that don't have a Main Street location were also able to come in and have a little pop-up tent, give out candy and decorations and costumes. And I think we estimated at least 300 folks, families coming through, and games and activities. So lots of fun, and there were some fun things going on here at the senior center as well. So Great. Another great event. Monmouth Business Association has just really stepped up to become so active in promoting our community, and we really appreciate their efforts because they're all small business people who have other important things to do. Also, just interesting, our monthly Polk County meeting from the COG. We have, the county commissioners, mayors, city managers. We also have partners there. And I just got to say, Business Oregon, our regional representative, Arthur Chappett, has been there. So many amazing programs that the state is offering to help businesses, help us, help attract, retain, and grow businesses. And I mentioned a lot of new loan programs, new grant programs, things that are really working to get out the door to help grow businesses. So really some great information there that, and Marty and I have lots of ideas that we need to come up with to tap into that money. So we'll be talking about some of those as they come up. That is my report. We do have our reports from boards and commissions. I'm gonna say the senior center. We was part of the festivities last night, as I said. Had some great activities, but they also behind me have an ofrenda this month. So they've made available to the community if anybody would like to come in and place an offering in memory of a family member. It's part of the celebration. And I can ask for a better description than I have of Dia de los Muertos. And just really thinking about ways to connect with other parts of the community. So the senior center was offering this way for folks to commemorate. And they're still taking those. So we had an addition this evening to remember family members who are gone and how we are going to celebrate their lives. So that was kind of a cool thing. The senior center also had a very successful soup and pie sale. So back to that tremendous tradition and great fundraiser for the Friends of the Senior Center. I think I heard them say they usually have 4 or 5 soups, and I think they have 12 different kinds of soups that folks had made, and just absolutely delicious. Good work going on at the senior center. Other boards and commission meetings since our last reports. Councillor Lopez and then Councillor McKee.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have a few reports to give tonight. I'll kick it off with the Arts and Culture Commission. The Arts and Culture Commission has been quite active lately, and I unfortunately missed their last meeting due to a scheduling conflict. But they have been actively engaging with the Arts and Economic Prosperity survey that I've delivered periodic updates about. It seems that there's national work groups national and statewide work groups that meet to engage on a similar level. It seems that we're tracking slightly better than others, across the country. So that's always great to hear. Currently, we have about 124 is the number that I was given, complete surveys, and a handful of partial surveys come back. The goal is 800, so we're only a part of the way there, but we have through middle of next year to get there. And the fact that we're tracking better than others is at least heartening in that. They've been actively engaging with now as we start to dial back some of the summer activities. They've been actively engaging with both WU and Central to make sure that surveys get out at their arts and culture related events throughout the year, and are looking for volunteers. So if you're interested in supporting the Arts and Culture Commission. You know, we'd love to have volunteers to engage with delivering the survey at these events that we're all going to. They're working on the library art show, and this will occur in January. More specifics to come, but I have a preview. It will be a literary theme, so quite fitting. Literary theme to the art show, and themed art shows are really fantastic because it gives a little bit of guidance, a little bit of direction, and you really get some neat things out of it, and you know, often surprised by what the community comes up with. Looking further ahead, they're looking at developing a logo or more specific branding to help continue to kind of forward the cause. There's a lot of written and also digital material that they've been putting out recently with some of the shows and also the AEP survey. And they've realized that, you know, maybe some more specific branding would help them and help, you know, kind of unite people. They're also beginning work on the July 4th art show, and that's that's been a big event that they've undertaken the past number of years and continue to refine it. Working on potential themes currently surround potentially, you know, sustainability or recycling, something along those lines. I don't know that they've determined a specific direction, but those are some things that were talked about in the latest meeting. I'd also like to offer you know, thanks to Ellen Osborne. She is our previous chair of the Arts and Culture Committee, and she's recently resigned from the committee to spend more time with family and other endeavors. But we all owe her a debt of great gratitude for forwarding the committee and creating, you know, the groundswell of activity that's going on today. I also have a report on MyNet, and I'll keep my MyNet report brief. I'm thankful to Ms. Chenard for the fiscal background. One addition there on a fiscal note is that MyNet continues to track slightly better than budget, and this has been a kind of a continuing thread throughout throughout this fiscal year. So worth calling out. They're kind of behind the scenes right now working on phone system upgrades. And this is a slow migration to an improved phone system. If you do still have a landline, it'll continue to work exactly as it always has. However, there will be an additional optional kind of online customer portal that you'll be able to log in and manage, you know, call forwarding, things like that, things that were a little harder to manage yourself. And they're slowly rolling that out. They're also working diligently on the Rick Rial expansion. Right now, they're drawing fiber lines out in that neck of the woods. Nothing customer facing yet, but doing the groundwork. And they're engaging with the state broadband office to follow up on potential future funding opportunities through grant funding for potential Falls City expansion. If you'll recall, one of the grants that they had received previously was to fund a feasibility study for Falls City. A future South Dallas expansion in the rural area south of Dallas brings the fiber right up to the edge of the city, and so looking ahead at those next steps there as well. I'll keep you updated as things progress. And then I also have an update on the Mid-Willamette Valley Homeless Alliance. The Homeless Alliance, as I'm sure you'll recall, has earlier this year received $3.7 million from HUD through the YHDP program, Youth Homelessness Demonstration Project. Really cumbersome term. Leave it up to HUD to create, those very vague terms, but it is what it is. Right now, they've just began to enter the implementation phase. So the funds have been received, distributed to the final service providers. There are 4 grant programs that were granted, and 2 of those specifically impact Polk County. 2 of them are for Polk County, which is fantastic. One is to to create, out of the two that impact specifically Polk County, one is to create a supportive services office, kind of like a resource room, but specific to you know, those that are on the verge of homelessness, and specific also to youth services. Another is to fund a kind of a Taylor's House 2.0 type concept. It's a very small youth shelter that's a transitional shelter, so not permanent housing, but just to get youth that are, you know, that are suffering homelessness or need a safe space to be, to get them that safe space to be, while we try to find a permanent space for them. So look for more information there as it comes. You know, the implementation phase is exciting. We get to start seeing some of these ideas and some of these grants really, you know, start to materialize into reality. The other thing that the Homeless Alliance is working on right now, which is, you'll hear more about this in the near future, is the PIT count. PIT stands for point in time. And this is a national count of individuals that are experiencing homelessness. It occurs in January each year. And the concept is that as a nation, we look at, you know, everyone, a snapshot in time, everyone that is experiencing homelessness. And this is used for demographics, it's used for funding, it's used for all levels of reporting, grant writing in the future. Generally, this count nationwide experiences somewhere between 50% and an 80% undercount. And that's tragic. So we're really working hard to ramp up the efforts surrounding this here in our community. This is integral to, you know, future work and making sure that we're providing, you know, right-sized services and taking care of people where and how we need to. So I will be reporting back as the work group continues, you know, defining roles with the PIT count. I'll be reporting back and encouraging all of you to, you know, volunteer a little bit of your time and engage in that count and support our community there. So thank you very much. That concludes my reports.
Thank you. Other boards and commissions? Councilor Oberst. And
Just
Councilor
quickly, last time I mentioned that Parks was hoping to have a groundbreaking for the skate park soon, early November. Turns out our contractor is, and I don't know what they're thinking, working on a skate park in Israel of all places, rather than here. So we're going to have to put off our groundbreaking just a little while until they're able to line up and start to work on our project. So I'll keep you posted.
Wow. Okay, Councilor McKeel.
I really wanted to go before Councilor Lopez because his is always such a long, elaborate, wonderful. And I'm going to do the tree board, and it's like we don't have the people on the tree board, and so it makes it difficult to do things. But we plug on as only people with trees and sticks can do. But we are, wait a second, actually I have to look at my OneNote. So we actually had a problem in Madrona Park, and that we plant trees and they keep dying. So before we do more planting in Madrona Park, we're going to get the soil tested to find out what's going on there. We planted a lot of willows last winter when it was lots of rain, and they didn't make it. So we don't know what's going on there, but yeah, we need to figure that out. We're actually trying to figure out our next project, which would be to help homeowners have trees. So that we've been kind of working on that for the last year, and the board members are like, okay, we got to get this done. So I think there's some motivation there. And we did successfully recruit a new member, and then we lost one. So it's like, yeah, I know. So we're like, oh, we're right there. But okay, now I'm just going to sign off.
Councilor Carey.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, I'm going to report on the Planning Commission meeting of October 19. And that was a work session um, devoted towards developing and fleshing out the Monmouth housing production strategy. We've been talking about the need for affordable housing ad nauseum, and this is a chance for us to, really dig in and find out A, what that means, B, what can we do to get there. It's not an easy answer. The definitions are sometimes the most difficult. However, there's a lot of work that's been done. There's research gathered, strategies being developed, and it will come to us probably early in January of next year. I doubt that it'll be ready for the December meeting, but it's good stuff. It's exciting. It's got some sobering terms, but and it will be linked also to our code revision process that we've spent quite a bit of time on today. They are linked, but they are also mutually exclusive. So there's just a bunch of stuff, very interesting, and they had a meeting, and it sort of, there was so much information, and it sort of they got bogged down in minutia, and they got to the, well, who's going to do that sort of a thing before they got actually to the whole substance of what's at hand. That will come. Again, a good project, and one that we look forward to diving into. So that's it for planning.
Just a reminder, and Councilor McKeel brings up the tree board is operating without a quorum. So if we know folks who would be interested in that, would appreciate applications. But also we had 2 openings on the budget committee. We received 2 applications. We sort of put those on hold. So we could potentially, these were folks who serve in many capacities in the city volunteers. So we were going to see if we had any new folks, new eyes, new perspectives, any recruiting that we've done. And I'm going to give everyone till Friday. If we don't have any additional applications by Friday, look to appoint those members at the next meeting. Think about that as well. Oh, we have 3 openings on the budget committee, pardon me. So we actually need.
We need one more than we've got for
more
sure.
than we have.
Right.
So if you want to think again of folks who can make that really more sort of targeted, directed, limited engagement with a city commission, that's a good spot for folks. So that and other openings. And with that, turn it over to Ms. Marty Wine.
Thanks, Madam Mayor and Council, for all your reports. You make my report easy because I'm left with not very much to talk about when you're all done with your reports. And I try to put a lot in the Friday notes so that you're up to speed with what our departments are doing. So I just want to add thanks not just only to the MBA for a great spooktacular event, but I think almost every city department contributed, helping with setup, takedown, buying candy, giving out candy. The senior center was really buzzing at the last night's event. And so, I guess I just want to say, I appreciate all the efforts of city staff to help support that event. Let's see. I mentioned in my Friday notes that we have hiring going on at the police department. We're going to have a transition in our community service officer position and are bringing somebody aboard who will overlap with our current community service officer. and a couple of people who have applied for our officer positions. So that's we also have a transition and have offered a job to somebody in our public works wastewater specialist position. So I know we're really, I know the mayor knows this. I've been at a lot of tables in the last 2 to 3 weeks where we've talked a lot about certain positions that are particularly difficult to fill. And so it's great when we can find good candidates and recruit them and hope that they will come and stay in Monmouth when we hire them. Let's see. I think that might be it. I'd call your attention to future agenda items on the agenda tonight. We have a bunch of stuff coming forward, including reviews of the franchise with Minet, a review of the franchise with Brant Sanitary Service, and that includes some changes in the Opportunities to Recycle program that'll be coming forward. So I just wanted you to know, even though once we get to near the end of the year, that we only have a couple of meetings left, we have a lot on our docket that will carry into next year. I think that's all I have to report tonight, and I'm always open to questions if there's anything that I have either noted in Friday notes that you want me to say more about, or other questions that might be on your mind. Thank you.
So this is an opportunity for council comments or announcements. Anyone have anything for that? Councilor Lopez.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. The only comment that I'll offer tonight is a reminder to please return your ballots. Please vote. No matter who you vote for or what you vote for, it is vital that we all exercise our right to vote. And please make sure to get those in a timely fashion.
Great, thank you. And a reminder, they do have the ballot drop box at Roth's, as well as in the entrance to the Independent City Hall, the Main Street side that is open and available 24 hours locally, as well as your ability to drive on over to Polk County, where they have the secure lockbox outside the county courthouse. All right. At this point, then, I would like to announce that we will move into executive session for the purpose of discussing real property transactions under ORS 192.662E. And discussions will allow the council to meet in executive session. Designated staff shall be allowed to attend the session. All other members of the audience will be asked to leave the room. We have none. We do have someone on the line. I believe no decision may be made in executive session. At the end of executive session, we will return to open session and welcome the audience back into the room. However, it is not anticipated that action will be taken this evening after returning. So we'll take a moment here. We will have our recording stop, and good evening to everyone while our cameraman closes up, and then we will convene in executive session. Poor Zach.
Thank you, Zach.
Yes.
Thank you, Zach.
Yeah. I agree.
We are in fact off. The green margin keeps popping up around the.
Looks like we're still recording.